Members, it's the appointed time, and we have a quorum. I call the meeting to order. Item number 1, confirmation of minutes. Paper number CB bracket 1448/14 to 15. That is the minutes of the special meeting on the 3rd of December 2014. So far, the Secretariat has not received any proposals for amendment. If there are no objections, I suggest that we confirm the minutes. Minutes confirmed. Information paper issued since the last meeting. You will find the details on the agenda. Anything you'd like to add? If not, we will move on to the next item. That is item number 3. The next regular meeting is set on the 24th of February, which is a Tuesday, at 2:30. There are 5 items proposed by the administration. One is PWP item number 3450RO, converting Chun Yip Street Playground as Kwun Tong Industrial Culture Park. The next one is related to 2 items, formation roads and drains in Tuen Mun. The third one is PWP item number 181WF, in situ reprovisioning of Shantin Water Treatment Works, South Works, Advanced Works. The fourth one is progress report on Kai Tak development and PWP item number 711CL, Kai Tak development. Infrastructure works for developments at the southern part of the former runway. The fifth one is PWP item number 45CG, district cooling system at Kai Tak development. Well, there are 5 discussion items. In order to make sure we have sufficient time for discussion, the next meeting will be extended by 2 hours. It will end at 6:30. Any questions? Mr. Leung Kwok Hong? Well, if there is a time, maybe we should have another meeting. That's something we have considered, but a lot of members have indicated that they have concerns and they would like to discuss it. And of course, we will try to find another meeting slot. There are actually a lot of items waiting. If you don't mind, we will extend the time of the same meeting. Well, very often I find that we spend a lot of time on items that comes earlier, and for the ones come later, we spend very little time on it. So, do you think that the ones that come first will attract more members? Well, we try to have 5 items in the meeting. And sometimes if more members speak on earlier items, maybe we won't have time for discussion for the last item. I'll try to make an arrangement in terms of priority and also how many members who would like to speak. We can only base it on a guesstimate. And if more time is needed, then we will have to have a special meeting, an additional one. Yes, there are more items than usual, with 5 for the next meeting. But in the coming month or 2, I see that there are actually quite a lot of items. Well, if we don't have sufficient time, maybe I will ask members whether they would like to have a special meeting. If there are no other questions, I suggest that we will have the 5 items in the next meeting. We move on to the next item. Briefing by the Secretary for Development on the Chief Executive's 2015 Policy Address. Let's invite the administration to join us. Yes? I have some questions. I noticed that the officials would like to save papers. They have everything in very fine print. Before we start, perhaps I would ask the officials to give us the Hong Kong map and the slide before it. That is the one on page 2. And also the penultimate, now the 4th page, counting from the back. It seems like they don't want to show us anything. They don't want us to see it. Nothing to do with long-sightedness. I don't think a 12-year-old can read it. Well, perhaps that is the case. Maybe they just want to make the most out of a piece of paper. And for some slides, it's not as clear. But we need to keep the information paper for future reference. Of course, you can always look at the screen. I understand what you're saying. Yes, well, arrangement is being made now. I would like to remind members that an information paper was submitted by the administration. It is in relation to increasing land supply, CB bracket 1407/14 to 15 bracket 01. The administration indicate that if there are questions, they would be happy to answer members' questions and have a discussion on this paper today. Let me welcome government officials that are joining us today. You will find a list in front of you. I'll dispense with an introduction. Well, I know that there is a PowerPoint presentation. Who is to take us through it? Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, for giving us the chance to come to talk to you today about our work and also the CE's policy address. Well, there's in relation to housing, transportation, land, environment, and conservation. I have a PowerPoint presentation, and I would ask the 2 permanent secretary to take you through it. First, Mr. Thomas Chow, Permanent Secretary for Development, Planning and Lands. Well, in the policy address, it is reiterated that housing is a key area that is of concern of the administration. They have the determination and they have the capability to revert the imbalance between demand and supply of housing. First of all, let me give you some background information on development of land since the 1970s. All along, the administration has supplied land for infrastructure and various areas to meet our development need. Since the 1970s to 1990s, we've developed land through reclamation, land formation, to build a new town to stabilize our land supply to meet the demand for further development. Since 1970s, the administration has put in place 9 new towns, and there is the most recent one is Tung Chung. In the 1990s, at the beginning, work has started to build this new town. And in 1980s to 2000, we have, through reclamation, created over 3,000 hectares of land. That is, per year, about 200 hectares.
Even so, after the Asian financial turmoil, Hong Kong has experienced a long period of economic depression and the property market slumped. At that time, we slowed down in terms of land development and housing, and therefore we did not have a lot of newly formed land, and you can see this on the graph. And since 2004 to 2013, the number of new housing units has shrunk by 38%. In this graph, we show you the process for land development. You can see it really takes time. In seeking to provide more land, whether we open up new land or we make the best use of land that has been developed, we have to go through a few statutory and also established procedures. In considering opening up new and large pieces of land for development, first of all, we have to do a planning and engineering study that will form the basis. And then during that time, the public and other stakeholders will be able to participate and make known their views and proposals. If necessary, the study work will include environment, transport, drainage, ventilation, and other aspects, and all these technical studies. After we have got the development proposal, according to the need, we will start the statutory planning procedure, including rezoning land by amending the OZP. Usually we have to go to the Finance Committee for funding support, and that kind of work will already take 3 to 4 years. Apart from that, with regard to roadworks and also formation of land, etc., we have to go through different procedures. We have to register people who are affected, and when they are eligible, we have to pay ex gratia payment, we have to give rehousing, or we have to pay statutory compensation. After the detailed study is done, again, we have to apply for site formation and infrastructural works funding support from the Finance Committee in stages. After resuming land, we have to form the land and then start infrastructural development and then build the houses. That will take 5 to 7 years. Therefore, from the graph, you will see that the entire process for land formation and housing building will take at least 11 to 14 years. On the 2nd of January, this map has been attached to that paper. In that paper, the map is clearer, but this one we have smaller print. In Hong Kong, we do not lack land, but we lack land that can be used for development. In the past few years, the Development Bureau and the departments concerned have taken a multi-pronged approach to take short, medium, and long-term measures in order to provide more land and also build up a land bank in order to tackle housing and other needs of Hong Kong people. This map shows us the different measures and their locations for providing land in the short, medium, and long terms. Together with the Planning Department, the Lands Department, the Development Bureau is working very hard to increase land supply, and we have short, medium, and long-term measures. With regard to short to medium-term land supply, we would rezone land, and also we can study the zoned land again to see what kind of sites can be used for housing. We are working on this. Number 2, we can increase development density of developable land. It is not that we do it on every piece of land. We will do a technical study according to need to see whether this can be done when all the development factors have been taken into account, and the biggest increase in density will be 20%. Next, to facilitate and expedite development or redevelopment on existing land. This would include expediting railway projects and also urban renewal projects. We will also streamline the planning procedure, and also we have introduced the land premium arbitration system. In the long term, we have the need to, and we will also actively take forward major land development projects in terms of NTA and also new town extensions. We'll also explore new sources of developable land or space. We are doing some studies to see whether we can reclaim land outside Victoria Harbour, or we can look at cave-in development or underground space, and also land tower development. Railway projects. Railway property developments are a main source of housing supply. For the West Rail, we have the West Rail Development Company to take forward the project, and this is a company set up together by MTRCL and the government. The MTRCL is the agent for promoting the project. We have got that in Nam Chong Station and also Long Ping North and also Chin Wan West and also Long Ping South projects. All these will give us 9,100 units. When the MTRCL has considered the views of residents, it has already completed the West Rail Yuen Long Station project, and it will give us 1,880 units. After all the procedures are completed, the tendering will be called. As a listed company, the MTRCL can decide when and how to promote their projects. However, since private housing is in tight supply, we will talk to MTRCL to see whether it can expedite its projects. In 2013-14, the MTRCL, with regard to LOHAS Phase 4, 1,600 units, it has tendered successfully for it in 2014-15. In To Kwa Wan Station and also LOHAS Phase 5 and 6, successful tenders have been called. And recently, on the 12th of January until the 5th of February, 1,500 units at Tin Shui Wai Light Rail will also be the subject of tendering. And it is planned that in 2014-15, MTRCL will also be tendering for other phases at LOHAS Park to provide 1,500 units. We will continue to promote a combined development of mass transit and also housing. As for Kam Tin and Lo Wai, they are other projects. We'll continue to discuss with MTRCL to see whether there is potential to develop housing at other stations. With regard to urban renewal, in Sanshan and Pao Chung Street and also Kwun Tong New Town Phases 2 and 3, we have already tendered successfully for those. And last year we have also awarded 2 projects in Hoi Tan Street. And altogether in 2014-15, we can provide 2,700 units by URA. Of course, they also have the self-initiated and demand-led redevelopment projects in order to respond to the needs of medium-income families and grassroots. While property prices continue to rise, we are exploring actively with URA to see whether it can contribute to increasing the supply of subsidized sale flats. We will continue to thresh out the details with the URA. After our coming to office, the current term government has continued to increase private housing land supply. It is estimated that the private housing land supply in 2014-15 is capable of providing more than 20,000 residential units, a record high since the government introduced the private housing land supply target in 2010. In terms of long-term land supply, we are actively promoting a series of long-term land supply projects. These include Kwun Tong North and Fanling North, Tong Chung New Town Extension, Hong Shui Kiu NDA, and also we would review Yuen Long South fallow land. We are doing a planning engineering study there. This table shows the area of land that can be developed in the long term and also the estimated flat production as well as the estimated year of first population intake. Moreover, we also have other long-term land supply programs. We would reclaim outside Victoria Harbour. We would look for Rockhaven development. We can have topside development at Hong Kong boundary crossing facilities at the bridge and also developing NT North and also artificial islands in the central waters. These will help us provide housing as well as providing land for economic development and improving the environment. We'll also update the Hong Kong 2030 planning vision and strategy. In fact, we have a long history of territorial development strategies. You remember we have issued the Hong Kong 2030 planning vision and strategy, but it was already published in 2017. It provided a framework for spatial planning and development for Hong Kong, and also it mapped out the major direction for Hong Kong's development, and it had a planning horizon up to 2030. According to the Census and Statistics Department, our population will increase by 1.4 million to 8.47 million by 2041, and the average household will fall from 2.9 to 2.7 persons in 2041. In other words, there will be a big increase in the number of households, but a drop in the household size. We therefore need to increase land. And also with globalization and also fierce competition amongst cities, we also need to enhance Hong Kong's competitiveness apart from housing. We therefore need land for other purposes as well. Against this background, we will update Hong Kong 2030. We will call it Hong Kong 2030 Plus. We will look at the spatial development and planning and also land and infrastructural development within a long-term framework. We hope we can have such a strategy that will be aligned to Hong Kong's actual situation. We will try to seek solutions. We will be pragmatic and practical, and we will be action-based in our work in order to tackle these very difficult issues about Hong Kong's development. I defer to my colleague. The PA particularly mentioned Lantau development, since Pearl River Delta has seen very fast economic development in recent years, since there will be the Twin Moon Chatlap-Kok Link Road that will be developed very soon. Lantau will be a very important part of Hong Kong's long-term development. Without affecting the commissioning of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, we have just had funding support from LEUNG that at the artificial island there we can do a detailed study to see whether we can provide 300,000 square meters GFA in order to promote bridgehead economy. And in the north of Lantau, apart from the Tung Chung New Town development, we are trying to secure funding support from LEUNG to do Penny Bay or Sunny Bay reclamation. Last year, we consulted this panel to do reclamation in the central waters, including at Khao Yi Chau. We can build an artificial island so that apart from Kowloon East and Hong Kong Island, we can have the third CBD. We believe a few 100,000 people could be housed there for development. We are trying to get funding support from LEUNG to do the strategic study. As you can see from the green arrows, the study will include this reclamation area and also NT West, as well as transport infrastructure with Hong Kong Island. In January 2014, we set up the Lantau Development Advisory Committee, and members have already put in a work plan and also the positioning of Lantau. The positioning of Lantau is such that in the north, it will be residential and commercial. In northeast, it will be tourism. And to the east and also the central waters, as we said, we hope we can have a few artificial islands, one of which will be developed into the third CBD. To the south, it will be for leisure tourism. But the rest of Lantau will mainly still remain as a country park. But in order to allow members of the public to use the country park, we will provide more facilities. In this map, we can see our initial work plan. We will look at the red boxes, and you will see we have the Tung Chung New Town Extension Study and also the study on topside development at the BCF at the bridge, and also Siu Ho Wan Reclamation Study. I talked about Sunny Bay Reclamation, and also the East Lantau Metropolis Study. And also, we will do other land development studies in blue.
Starting from the left, you see in Cheung Sha and Siu Ah Chow. We hope to do a study on spa and resort facilities. In addition, we would like to extend the cable car from Ngong Ping to Tai O. The north of Lantau Island, as I mentioned just now, is mainly for commercial use. We will conduct a strategic study to find out the positioning of this project. To the south, we have a study on recreation and tourism development. What remains is those in green. They are Tai O improvement works, Ma Wan Chung improvement works, Mui Bo improvement works, and to the south of Lantau Island, we would like to, by phases, construct mountain bike trail network. In relation to the road system, we would improve the bends at Kangshan Road and South Lantau Road, and we would explore about extending the hours outside when the closed roads are open. Well, apart from developing land, we would like to build a pool of talents as well. In relation to manpower shortage, there is quite a lot of ink spilled on this in the policy address. The Construction Industry Council aims at attracting talent and putting in measures to improve the image of the construction sector. The government will set up a construction industry recruitment center providing career counseling services, on the spot job interviews and job fairs for construction workers. In the past few years, there are quite a lot of people joining the industry, but for certain trades, they still experience acute manpower shortage and an aging workforce. In the coming few years, according to survey, there is a need for an additional 10,000 or 15,000 skilled workers, about 5 to 6% of the overall workforce. But we have to safeguard the job opportunities and incomes of local workers. We would like to import labor. By importing labor, we can make available skilled workers to train newcomers and semi-skilled workers. The supplementary labor scheme is a general scheme targeting the specific trades. We think there is a room for improvement to give more flexibility. When it comes to construction industry, the trades are defined quite finely. We don't want to see the manpower cost to increase, so we have introduced to the Labour Advisory Board about our initial idea of importing labor. That is, these imported labours are allowed to work for the same contractor across different projects. We will continue to work with the labour sector and the construction sector. We will report to the LAB details of our discussion. We hope that in the second quarter of this year we will be able to launch the enhancement measures. According to the Construction Worker Registration Ordinance, there is a stringent requirement on the attendance record of labourers. Let's continue. Let me repeat that under the Construction Workers Registration Ordinance, there is a stringent requirement when it comes to the record of workers' attendance, so the chance of abusing our measures is slim. Apart from increasing land conservation is also our key area. Last year, actually in February 2013, we've invited the Antiquities Advisory Board AAB to review on the conservation policy. At the end of last year, they finished with the review. They have given us some recommendations on our policy direction. Say, for example, setting up of, sorry. Chairman, I don't know how much longer the Permanent Secretary will take. Well, I'm about to finish. Please continue. As I said, the AAB has given us some recommendations. We will liaise with the relevant departments and look into these recommendations. In due course, we will report to the LEUNG. This is our conclusion. We will adopt a multi-pronged approach to make better use of land available, and we will do our best to develop new land for development use, and we will increase land supply in short, medium, and long term. And we endeavor to increase land resources for Hong Kong. One of the important areas for land development is to garner support from the LEUNG community, and different stakeholders. We hope to improve communication with various sectors and work together with them to resolve this land shortage issue. Now I open the floor for members to ask questions. Let me read out the names of members who have indicated they would like to ask questions. Wong Kwok King, Poon Siu Ping, Gary Chan, Charles Mok, Kwok Ka Ki, Chan Kam Lam, Kenneth Chan, Alice Mack, Leung Chi Chang, Albert Chan, Michael Tian. May I suggest a 4 minutes question and answer included. If necessary, there will be a second round. First, Mr. Wong Kwok King. Thank you. In relation to an imbalance of demand and supply, well, they finally identified the roots of the problem. Housing has always been a concern for the public. There is an imbalance between the demand and supply. Without flour, you can't make bread. Now there is flour. I really welcome their measures. As the administration said that in the past 10 years that there is a drop of 38%, resulting in an imbalance. Now the THB has put in place an LTHS, that is long-term housing strategy. They have given a target for the first 5 years. But what about the next 5 years? Is there a guarantee? I heard from the Secretary that when it comes to land supply, there is no 100% guarantee. So I have a question for Mr. Chan, the Secretary. When it comes to the land supply for the next 5 years, is there enough land to meet housing demand? And when it comes to land development, you mentioned about eastern waters of Atlanta Island, the plan for artificial islands. I think it is planned with vision. It's indeed difficult to find land. Artificial island is a viable option. I would like to ask the Secretary to construct an artificial island. Have you considered connectivity by tunnels or by railway? If it's an isolated island, then there will be problem if it's inaccessible. Will they also consider constructing a tunnel with vehicular traffic and railway service to link Lantau Island and Hong Kong Island with the artificial island? Secretary, I thank Mr. Wong for the question. In relation to the first question, that is land supply for the next 5 years, and whether there is sufficient land supply to build the number of housing in the target. In relation to the 480,000, 60% of them is public housing, that is subsidized housing and public housing, PRH, 40% private. We're talking about the 60%, 290,000 units. We have identified land to supply 250,000 PRH public housing units. So there is a shortage of about 30,000. We are exploring different channels to fill the gap. We have to make sure that we have sufficient land for the 250,000 units. What we're doing now is rezoning application for land identified. We're talking about 150 sites, 210,000 units, 70% of them are public housing. We are also looking at increasing the density for the land identified. With the Works Department, we are also looking at expanding the footprint of the sites, thereby increasing the number of units to be constructed. And we're also exploring other means to increase land supply. I'm not going to go into details for things that I've mentioned. In relation to the artificial island in central waters of Lantau Island, we ask for funding approval for a feasibility study from the LEUNG. This will include the connectivity between the artificial island and Hong Kong Island. Thank you. Mr. Poon Siu Ping. Thank you. Just now you mentioned about land development, that it will take about 13 to 14 years before units are constructed. You also mentioned about the manpower shortage in the construction sector. I would like to first ask this question. You said that in the coming few years there is a shortage of 10,000 to 15,000 workers. Perhaps you get this figure from the CIC, Construction Industry Council. In year 2000, CH Tong said that CH Tong actually built about 50,000 units, and you talk about building 20,000. So is that figure accurate, or are you relying on the CIC? Well, you said that there is a manpower shortage for construction sector, so you would like to use a supplementary labor scheme to resolve this problem. You will put in place enhancement measures. There are 26 trades with manpower shortage. You previously talked about enhancement, and now you talk about further enhancement. Of course, from the labor sector, the administration will have to exercise caution to ensure that priority is given to local workers. What I find regrettable in the policy address is that it's only glossed over in the policy initiative. Nothing is mentioned in the policy address with the increasing number of accidents. We're talking about 150 people joining the trade, but this is kind of like a dying industry. How can you ensure that there is sustainable development in this industry? How can you ensure that local workers are given job opportunities? Are there specific measures to deal with the problem? Say, for example, we're given a high number of accidents in the industry. Parents are reluctant to send their children they're reluctant to allow their children to join the trade. In relation to the estimate of manpower shortage, 10,000 to 15,000 is rather scientific. About the enhancement measures on top of the enhancement of the supplementary labor scheme, well, we've been working on it. In relation to safety, in the past few years, we've put in place measures to drive down the numbers.
But of course, one accident is one too many. Could I defer to Mr. Wei, the PS, to give you more details? Yes, with regard to construction workers' projection figures, we have done those together with the CIC. What we did was we tried to estimate the number of public and private projects, and then we would look at the number of workers used to construct one unit. That is why the 10,000 to 15,000 vacancies are quite reliable. As for the supplementary labor scheme, it is not sector specific, but we believe there is room for targeting the construction industry. In the year before last and also last year, we did some optimizing work, and that is before applications are supplied by the contractors, we tried to help them get better prepared so the Labor Department and the LAB can assess the applications more easily. This time around, we would look at the post-importation phase to see how they can become more productive, and that is what will allow them to work on more than one project. Number 3, accidents. Actually, industrial accident rate has been on the decrease, but we are aware that we are not doing as we had hoped to with regard to fatalities. Next, Gary Chan. Thank you, Chairman. Increasing land supply can tackle the shortage of housing problem. I can see the Bureau Director and his colleagues are really racking their brains to try to find land. But of course, some measures are controversial. For example, you say 70 sites with no conservation value should be used for housing. But I believe they will just measure together 150 hectares. How many units do you plan to build on these, and what is the ratio of public-private housing? Will that again be 6:4? I have to remind the director that I have always heard you say find more land for public housing, but then with regard to small and medium-sized units in the private market, I think they have been overlooked. You must understand that the prices or even rental of such units are exorbitant, and they are outside the affordability of the average member of the public. If you only concentrate on public housing and disregard the private housing part, you are not covering the entire situation. So I'd like to ask you whether you would also set a target for small private housing. For example, will you put out sites with restrictions on the number of units and also the size of the units? At the environment panel yesterday, we agreed that we should go for greener transport. In the new development areas, will you plan for infrastructure to provide for green transport? For example, in certain NDAs, can we have low-emission buses or even electric buses? As you know, you need to provide charging stations along the road. Would you be planning for these in new towns? Thank you. First of all, with regard to the 70 sites in green belts, we are looking at providing 80,000 units, and 70% of that would be public housing. As for private housing, maybe you're aware that in the past few years, we introduced sites with restrictions on the number of units and also the size of the units. And also we said that the successful bidder should provide a certain number of units on certain sites. We are still sticking to this position, but we will have to see where the sites are and the environment in the vicinity. In certain sites, the size is too small and it will not be meaningful to put in these restrictions. And if there is no support facilities around there, again, this is not meaningful. And if you look at the last 2 years, you will see that the units built should be small and medium-sized. We said 70% of those should be of such sizes. And in the market now, we see that there is more interest in building small and medium-sized units. If you look at the Lohas Park project, the MTRCL has actually asked the Town Planning Board to allow them to build smaller units. As for green transport in NDAs, certainly we will consider that we are thinking about Kai-tak. As you know, we have an environmental friendly transport system in Kai-tak. Now, how can we provide more open space and go for low carbon green transport? We will certainly do that. Next, Charles MOK. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to make use of these 4 minutes to talk about your proposal on smart city. If you have time, you can respond. I think this will be with us for quite some time, and later on I will be asking the sector and professionals to share their views with you. Number one, I must say something about the Chinese name. I think you have heard this already because it has been attracting negative criticism. You call it a smart city is all right, but in Chinese it sounds like a clever city. Have you gone for a term on the mainland? Well, I have done some research. I don't think you have copied any mainland term. I hope even on these small matters, you will be responsive to public comment. If you think it is better to call it an intelligent city in Chinese, then please do so. I think it is okay to use Kowloon East as a pilot. You don't need to wait for the entire Kai-tak to be completed, and you can have a pilot project in an area in Kowloon East. I'm not going to ask you questions yet and the functions of that smart city because you might take up all 4 minutes. However, I have heard about traffic and transport, and it is said that there will be road signages and people flow, parking, etc., and also environment buildings. Some people say there may be the provision of free Wi-Fi service, etc. If you can really do this, then function-wise, this is actually what every department should do. But this is not what you call an intelligent city. And I'd like to make 3 points. Number one, a really intelligent city should be the subject of holistic planning. You must do so interdepartmentally. And also, it should involve new infrastructural development. You should not just say there will be a sign telling you how many parking spaces are still available on the left or on the right. Secondly, the data. You say you would open up your data. I hope you will really do so. I hope you will allow the public, enterprises, or individuals to make use of the relevant data and do applications with them. Number three, public-private partnership. You should not go it alone. There's still some time. Maybe the secretary can respond. I am sharing with you my understanding or reading of a smart city and what I have heard from experts. These are really initial views. I'm not saying you are wrong because you have not even started to do it. I just want you to get it right at the planning stage. Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Charles MOK, for his question and comments. On naming the city, we can give it more consideration. As for the thoughts shared, holistic planning, interdepartmental work, I think that is very valid. We would think along those lines. As for opening up data, yes, we'll do it. As for PPP, it depends on the projects themselves. Maybe Mr. Y would like to supplement? Mr. Y? As to the name, I think it depends on individual judgment. Mr. MOK will know many places in the world are building smart cities and wise cities. We want to find a new name because we don't want to duplicate others, but that is not very important. As for my understanding of a smart city, in fact, people in the city own a lot of data, and everyday data is being created. If we can collect and analyze and apply such data in a systematic manner, then we can use the data to manage the city. So we can have a low carbon city, so we can conserve energy, water, and manage our waste. This is the ultimate aim. Just now, Mr. MOK mentioned a few basic principles, and in fact, they coincide with the principles in our mind. In the new NDA, when we go about infrastructure, we can more easily apply these, but we don't want to wait for NDAs which are for the future. So we are trying it out in Kowloon East first. Right, your time is up. Thank you very much. Next, KK Kwok. I don't know what people who are listening to the meeting may be thinking. This term of government said housing is the most important policy, but we have had this meeting for so long, and it seems the only message we are getting is that don't come to us for land. And you say there may be controversy with land, and you need to get the consent of the people, including NT Northeast and also 2030, etc., and also the artificial islands. You don't have a time frame for anything. And then in 2012, you told us that there are 4,000 hectares of idle government land. And you have told us many times that some cannot be used and some are too small. But then the final figure was 390, and we have been asking for a list of such government land which is lying idle. Out of 4,000 hectares, you in fact told us that there is not much you can use. How can you face people who are in subdivided units and who are waiting for PRH? You told us the planning process, which is about 12 years. But in your hands, you have short-term tenancies awarded. You also have cleared government buildings like abattoirs in Kennedy Town, the old incinerator site. And there are many other examples. So when can you give us a list of the government land that can be used? And also, can you come clean on this here? And also about village development. You said there were 1,200 hectares. And then later on, you said it is 937, but 937 hectares is also a very big number. You are putting out land for sale, but in Tai Wai, Meitin Road, only 687 square meters, and also in To Kwa Wan, 476 square meters. I mean, they are peanut sizes, and yet you have your land sitting idle and you are not using it. You are not putting it out for use. Is it because you want to maintain a high premium policy? Because you know the premium would be used for infrastructure development. Is it that you will just say it's all right when people don't have housing, but as the government, I would maintain a high land premium policy because I want money for infrastructural development? Secretary, I'd like to thank Mr. Kwok for his questions, but his criticism is quite far from the truth. Chairman, with regard to the 4,000 hectare idle government land in the urban area, there isn't such land. If that's the case, we wouldn't have been have to work so hard. I gave an answer to members earlier on, and I gave you a table to see that now we only have 390 odd hectares, and we have already released the exact locations on the internet. Please do surf the web for the locations. And if you think which site can actually be used for public housing or for land sale to build private housing, please let us know. We'd be very happy to take a look if we have overlooked anything. As for STT, we have been inspecting them and we have issued notice to many, so we will take them back for sale or for public housing. As to those that cannot be taken back yet, there are different reasons for it. As for village type development and a few hundred hectares, as you know, we have 700 odd recognized villages in Hong Kong, and the land involved is scattered around the villages. There is no support facility. It is very far away from the urban area. Last but not least, I have to clarify again, we do not have a high land premium policy.
Mr. Chen Kam-lam, the Secretary has given us a lot of figures. We need to continue our endeavors with long-term land supply. There is an acute demand for housing, and in LEUNG, the opposition stages a non-cooperative movement. When it comes to housing projects, they resort to filibustering or vetoing to tie the hands of the administration. Just now, Dr. Kwok mentioned about people living in subdivided flats, that there is no assistance given to them. But the fact is, if we do not develop new land, it would be more difficult for those people to move to public housing. That is a fact. I hope that some members from the opposition will refrain from blindly objecting to certain projects or proposals. Well, for some of these development projects, they need transportation facilities. Say, for example, the To Kwa Wan Station mine progress has been good. But recently, I heard from nearby residents that they are very concerned because if the project is to take place for the To Kwa Wan Road and the Sin Kwa Road, it will be very noisy with the additional traffic. When we develop a new area, do you make sure that transportation will be properly done? Say, for example, this Kowloon mine. Are there any measures to improve the transportation network to allay the fears of nearby residents? I thank Mr. Chen for the question. I will defer to Mr. LEUNG, Director for Planning. In relation to the former mine at To Kwa Wan, we have conducted a detailed feasibility study. This is actually a very good example to show that we work very hard to resolve transportation issues. We have conducted several rounds of transport impact assessment, and we have explained to the residents a number of times. We made it clear that when it comes to transportation issues, we can improve junctions and other measures to resolve these issues. And the studies show that they are surmountable. And the housing units built there are basically PRH units and HOS units. So there won't be as many private cars using the roads nearby. There is capacity to handle cope with the traffic. Yes, it may be public housing, but residents will still have to travel. There may not be as many private cars, but what about public transportation? There may be a lot of traffic. Did you go to the district to explain to the residents to dispel their worries? They live there. They know what it's like. So I would like you to go to the district to talk to them more, to explain to them that there may be additional traffic, there may be more people living there, but the impact will be insignificant. You'd really have to talk to them to garner their support. Will you enhance communication, Secretary? Yes, of course. Next, Mr. Kenneth Chan. Well, the policy address this year talks about development. it actually has disappointed groups and individuals that are concerned with development. It's not that, they don't act like the loyalists who applaud the administration for saying that they will find land, this and that. But it's like the steed is starving while the grass is growing. Well, I urge the administration to work harder in this area. Well, it's in relation to legislation. They've always said that there is a manpower shortage. When it comes to management and legislating for tree protection, at least in this policy address, he should say something, at least about the direction, and when they will they will do more about management of trees, training of arborists, legislation to protect trees. At least tell us something about it. This is rather disappointing. I mentioned about tree laws the first time I met him. Well, and when it comes to small houses, it's related to land, it's related to housing. Strictly speaking, it is not the responsibility of Mr. Paul Chan alone when it comes to small house policy. It's being dealt with by the CH Tung and Donald Tsang and now the CY LEUNG government. But why don't they actually review this policy? Is it because of the numerous conflict of interest and the vast interest vested in it? It is indeed a hot potato, a burning one, and they think that if they don't look at it, it doesn't exist. But it's very important. If you want to efficiently develop land, then you have to review the small house policy. And when it comes to town planning system, in this panel I asked you to talk to the THB and to arrange for a meeting. For quite some time, we've been asking for review by phases on town planning. CY LEUNG talks about it's difficult to develop land, there are judicial reviews, and there is also the town planning procedure, making it sound like the town planning procedure is actually a stumbling block. But if you properly handle it, then nothing is insurmountable. Say, for example, the New Yuen Long Center, mentioned in the policy address, it will generate thousands of flats. Well, I am quite familiar with this project because I've been involved. This project has been going on for quite some time, and it was properly handled, and it's done quite well. There are two cases when the court decides that there is room for review and there is some shortfall in the town planning procedure. You have to increase the democratic element in the process. This will help with the resistance you meet when you try to implement an idea. I am disappointed when it comes to development in the policy address. The issues that I'm concerned with are not covered. Well, Mr. Kenneth Chen talks about 3 areas, say for example tree management. Well, there is one line in the policy initiative. Well, maybe if we have time, I will ask the administration to respond. I don't think this can be dealt with in just one single meeting. We need to make it an agenda item in future meetings. Next, Ms. Alice Mack. In the policy address, in paragraph 105, he said that there will be some labor measures And the administration will continue to look at the effectiveness of these measures. And if they don't meet the aspirations, they will explore other more effective and appropriate measures. Well, I think that they're trying to enhance the supplementary labor scheme. This is the beginning. If we give them the green light, I'm sure that the other measures mentioned in paragraph 105 will start to come. The labor unions strongly object to talking about a supplementary labor when workers don't work enough hours, and they have exaggerated the impact of manpower shortage. It seems that they are blaming the workers. If you really have the workers' interest in mind, well, the administration said that they would do a lot of work, they would find land, they would study about reclamation. I'm sure that you will need a lot of people in the lands department, because rezoning the 150 sites is no easy task. Last year, Hong Kong Island and Kowloon, there are 2 senior as a surveyor, but there is only 2 elementary posts. If you really have the interest of workers in mind, then think about the fact that some workers are underworked. Don't exaggerate the manpower problem in the construction industry. When we're all trying to find land to build houses, you have to consider whether the staff members in the relevant departments can cope. The information I just mentioned was given by someone from the lands department. I think you really have to tackle problems faced by frontline officers. About the manpower shortage of skilled workers, just now Mr. Y mentioned about this, and I'm not going to repeat it. The CIC gave a scientific estimate given the projects in the pipeline. We propose to enhance the supplementary labor scheme to expedite the application process, and once these applications are approved, the laborers imported are allowed to work for the same contractor in different projects. Well, say for example, concrete. Sometimes in one single contract, workers may not work every single day, but with prior approval, a worker is allowed to work for different projects in this for the same contractor. It is better use of productivity. Just now, Ms. Alice Mack mentioned about how hardworking the colleagues are in the department. I agree, because in the past 2 years or so, when it comes to measures related to land, we're all working very hard. We've been very busy. We will try to get more resources. And in terms of management, we will prioritize. We will focus on those ones that are more urgent. And we really appreciate the hard work put in by our colleagues. Next, Mr. Leung Chi-chung. The DAB supports building more PRH units to meet the need of society. Well, the Development Bureau is tasked to find land. I think that itself is a problem. It seems that there is still a shortage of land for 40,000 units. And I heard from the CE in the policy address that they will not stop at identifying land. What about this shortfall of land for 40,000? Where are they going to find it?
發展嘅重點
Let me look at the main development areas. One Yunlong, and then the islands, and then the North District. You talked about reclamation, but it's too far away. If I look at these development areas, Yunlong has this crisis, and that is there will be too much housing and too many people moving in, and the transport infrastructure cannot support it. The Development Bureau is responsible for planning, but after people move in, who will solve the problems for us? You will have to get the support of the district council, but first of all, you have to give them the answer. So maybe you can take the opportunity now to explain things. I believe you will be adding like 400,000 people to Yunlong. How can we cope? Is it that my figures are right? If the figures are derived from here. Altogether, 123,000 units. And you just multiply it by households of 3. That will give you 400,000 people. People are going to be very crowded in Yunlong. Thank you for that question. In fact, whether it's Yunlong or other places, if we need to develop land and increase population, then of course we are going to do transport impact assessments in these cases. And I'd like to ask the Director of Planning, Mr. Leung, to give you the details. On future housing development, Mr. Leung, you are very correct. Yunlong and Tuen Mun will be 2 areas where there will be fast population increase. There will also be large-scale developments like in Hong Shui and Yunlong South. Those are NDAs. When we do planning, we will consider transport on 2 levels. One, local transport. We will build roads, we will increase connectivity. And secondly, the regional level. We are talking about strategic large-scale transport facilities. We are aware that in Tuen Mun, Yunlong, we have West Rail, Route 3, and Chek Lap Kok Corridor. They are going to be helpful to the overall transport situation. We understand that development projects are not built within 1 or 2 days. Many will take 10 to 20 years to complete, and during that time, we will continue to complement that with infrastructure development. Next, Albert Chan, Chairman. Land supply is always sensitive and controversial. It is sensitive in 2 ways. One, during the planning stage, whether it is open, fair, and just, and 2, whether land acquisition and resumption is fair, just, and also open. Why is NENT so controversial? At the beginning, it was not very heated, but then when Mr. C.Y. Leung termed it as the backyard for mainland tycoons, then opposition rose wave after wave, and also you resume people's farmland instead of the golf course, so people think you are unfair. And also, if you want to encroach upon country parks, people are going to fight you. You dare not even ask about the 2,000-hectare military land. We can have 6 tin shui wais built on those 2,000 hectares of military land. So is it that you are fair in land resumption if you can use the golf course or part of it and some military land and also some private farmland, then people would find that acceptable. I object to Kutong development because it is all for private development. Li Ka-shing wouldn't thank you for that. Originally, you mentioned that new towns would be developed in NT Northeast, but now once C.Y. Leung assumed office, he said that that would be the backyard for mainland tycoons. So let us get back to basics. People are not buying your proposal to provide 480,000 units. If you are really looking for land, ask the garrison to give you some of their sites and also use the golf course. And then you will be able to let people know in which districts how many units will be built, so they will add up to 480,000 for the next 10 years. In the past, the British colonial government released military sites for use. So can you not now look for land from every aspect and not allow the rich and famous to continue to hold on to the land, and so that you have not so big a headache? Secretary, thank you for that question. We face a shortage of land supply, and this is not just for the near term. And I can say we are taking a multi-pronged approach to tackle the issue in the short, medium, and long term. Mr. Chan said that the NENT would be a backyard for the mainland tycoons, but that is a misunderstanding. We have clarified many times that it would not be turned into a special zone for mainlanders to enter without a visa. In Kutong North, 60% of the 60,000 units to be built will be public housing. And in the future, we are going to develop mostly medium and small-sized units. And as for the golf course, Chairman, in the initial assessment study of NT North, we have included that as a study item. And also the HAB is now reviewing sports land. And as for the military sites, there is still a defense need for the military sites. Therefore, we have no intention to rezone the military sites. Well, sorry, we can see many of the garrison's land is full of weeds. Even the barracks are deserted. Well, later on, if there is an umbrella revolution, then maybe you need to station tens of thousands of garrison in Hong Kong, but now they are squatting on the land and people are angry. You are tempting another umbrella movement if you don't release the military sites. Next, Michael Tian, Chairman, the New People's Party welcomes the upgrading of the artificial island so as to link up NT West and Island West with the artificial island. To us, this is the way to tackle the future capacity saturation of West Rail. I'm sure transport infrastructure has everything to do with railways. Well, I remember when the West Rail was built, the administration did not need to fork out 1 cent. MTRCL financed it on its own because of other property rights. The same goes for the underwater section. And can we repeat that experience? I think if there is the artificial island, there will be a bridge linking it up with Hong Kong Island. We can have a railway bridge. And then from Lantau to Tuen Mun, there may be a cross-harbour tunnel. It's just like the airport railway going under Victoria Harbour. So perhaps through development rights, the MTRCL can totally finance that project. My question is, Secretary, you are commissioning a consultancy study, but you came to us a few times and we returned it to you because we were not happy about it. Can you tell the consultant that it would have to look at the transport? And will you also specify that they have to consider a 5th cross-harbour railway to link up Island West with the artificial island? And also whether they can initially study the financing part so as to lower the financial burden on the government. Secretary, thank you. Thank you for that question. Chairman, we would like to build an artificial island in the central waters so that at Khao Yi Chau, between Hong Kong Island and Lantau, if we can have an artificial island with 600 to 800 hectares, and if we can house hundreds of thousands of people there, so it will become a new town and also the 3rd CBD for Hong Kong. It is only going to be 4 kilometers away from Hong Kong Island, so it is really like the Tate Can Tunnel. We asked for funding support to do a consultancy. The consultancy is about the technical feasibility of having an artificial island, and we don't only look at the island itself because we are aware of other views saying that there can be other artificial islands built so as to take care of obnoxious waste. As I said, if we have one in Khao Yi Chau, we of course have to consider the transport connectivity. Apart from linking up with Hong Kong Island, we have to link up with Lantau. Now, when Hong Kong Zhuhai Macau Bridge will be commissioned, we are going to link up Tuen Mun and Chek Lap Kok. And if we are going to develop the artificial island, and in the long term, if we can balance development between the east and west, then connecting Lantau with Tuen Mun will be a necessity. And the railway is one way to do this. We will include this in the consultancy study. What about the financial side? I hope when you come to us, you should have asked the consultancy to see whether financially you can do what the airport railway did to lower the financial burden on government. Well, maybe Mr. Y can supplement the details. Well, yes, we will look at the feasibility of such financial arrangements. I think that will have a bearing on whether the public will find this acceptable. We are only talking about ballpark figures, of course. Next, Ms. Chen Yun Han. Chairman, I really like to see how the Secretary is going to answer me. Secretary, you seem to be just going forward, and you don't know what problems you are creating. Now we build housing, but many other problems have arisen. Like Leung Chi-Cheng said, transport, noise, and also residents' aspirations. Very often, people object to your projects. And also, Chairman, there are a lot of problems that would arise after these projects are built, like noise on Fanling Highway. The same goes for import of labor. You say you should go for the import of general workers, but then we already have the general workers importation scheme. Here you emphasize the importation of skilled workers. I think this is you're challenging local workers. Why do you want to be so high profile? We already have the system. We already have the general importation scheme, and business is talking to workers already. But why do you give the powers to the Director of Labor, recently you have tightened the policy. I'm talking about Greece, actually. And the most radical party has won the seat of premier. And you are not working on leveraging against the long service payment and MPF and also standard working hours. And still, you are talking about importation of labor.
Well, there are lots of measures that came late, but now they still talk about supplementary labor, importing labor. They just want to do it without thinking about the consequence. I am not a radical. I am very mild. I use the example of Greece. If you want a stable society or you want a society that favors the conglomerate and the business sector without thinking about the grassroots, Ms. Chan is not a radical, and neither am I. When it comes to problems with our labor, well, you find in the slide that it's not about importation of general labor. We have conducted. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. I want you to explain. I'm a veteran. Well, under the general importation of labor, well, they are skilled workers. Say, for example, welders working under the sea. We have the system. But why do you want to expedite it? Why do you challenge the labor sector in such a high profile way? You want the labor sector to occupy Central? We act in accordance with the existing supplementary labor scheme. We would like the labor sector to learn, to get a better understanding with us. We have made it clear when we announced the proposal that there is a premise. Of course, I want Hong Kong to be good as well. When Chris Patten launched the general supplementary labor import scheme, well, it has generated new problems. Well, everything works well, and then there is the additional measures. Yeah, I want you to understand that we don't mind about general labor, but why do you paint us to a corner? Secretary, there are two general or basic principles when it comes to importation of labor. Priority will be given to local workers, and local workers will not see their income level affected even with importation of labor. The labor sector should work together with us to find a solution. We should not be fighting each other, because that will only delay the projects. Whether it's infrastructure project or housing project, it will have a negative impact on society. Mr. Ray Chan, the general direction of the policy address is to increase developable land. How come that you will have to fight when you get a small plot of land? I'm sure the Secretary is aware that not having enough is not a problem, but distributing it unevenly is. Some people are actually saying that, why do you take my land and not his? Well, you talk about the military sites. You said that we have the duty to provide military sites for the PLA, and there is no plan to change the land use. But have you asked the PLA to see if there is any elbow room? Because the time has changed. It's not like the colonial days. They don't have to undergo training here. They can do it on the mainland. If you have difficulties, tell us. At least tell us, well, I've tried. And in relation to taking back land with private clubs on it, and in NXG, you said that in 2015 there will be a preliminary result. We see that for these land occupied by private clubs, for some of them you can use them by offering a cheap rent, say for example South China, whereas there are others that are for just the selected few. And yesterday I read from the press that perhaps it's someone from the administration saying that it won't help much. It wouldn't help much. But that is not the crux of the problem. It's about the general policy. Say, for example, the golf course. If you think that the development is for public interest, you can give them sufficient notice to take back the land. But that the person who is close to the source, he says that the period may be shortened, but it's not really suitable for development. So we see that they are reluctant to do so. But what the public see is that it's prime land and it's only used by the selected few, and they are not charged market rent. It's not that we don't want them to use it, but at least charge them a market rent or let us use it. And there are just the recreational clubs for disciplinary services. How come there is one for the police and there is none for Hong Kong people? Why can't the site be released for development? Thank you, Mr. Chen, for his questions. Yes. We don't have a sufficient land for both housing and other development. When it comes to sites for private clubs, recreational use and sports use, the HAB is actually conducting a review. They think there will be a result in 2015, that is this year. When it comes to military sites, I mentioned previously that because for defense purpose, there is no plan to rezone these military sites. And before the reunification, these sites are handed over to the PLA. Actually, some sites that they did not need were returned to the administration. So it has happened before. For the currently occupied ones, they think that there is a need. When it comes to the golf course, well, just now we've said that the review is still ongoing, the HAB review. And in NT North, we have the preliminary feasibility study. This is included as one of the items. Thank you. Next, Mr. James Tian. I think this is a time for members to say what's on their minds, because we only have 4 minutes. That's not enough for answering questions. When it comes to land development or demand, this is how I see it. This government is different from the 2 previous ones, and is different from the colonial government, because in the colonial days, governors are sent here. And now, well, with the design of the Hong Kong SARG, it's nothing to do with the CE or the secretary. Each term is just about 5 or 10 years. It's not like in the colonial days, it's rather continuous. So there is a lack of continuity. And it is reflected in land development. In C.H. Tong's days, he talked about building a lot of public housing. And that's why he proposed the 85,000 units. And then the property market turned into negative equity. In Donald Tsang's days, it's changed to application list. So over the 5 years, there was no land available for building housing. And in C.Y. Leung's time is kind of like C.H. Tong's days. Well, he was blamed for the 85,000 units. So he feared that if he produced too many units, the same may happen. yes, there is land made available. If they're sold in a year or two, and if and later there won't be any more land for sale. Maybe in the short term, on the face of it, there is land, but in the long run, there is none. And I think it's a matter of sustainability. Well, I would also like to talk about what I think about the 2 or 3 years. First, the Secretary denied that we have the high land price policy here. He's criticized. I'm a developer, and I do think there is such a policy. Otherwise, for the application list, well, we don't have the application list. When you submit a tender, of course, it will go to the highest bidder. If that is the case, why is there not a high land price policy? You can't possibly give it to the lowest bidder. And so your approach is in effect high land price policy. And I do think the administration should not be so scared of the labor sector. You can get the votes of representatives from the labor sector here. I'm sure you can get them to come to the negotiating table with you. If construction workers are earning so much, or this much, or this little, there won't be many construction workers in the trade. And if you want to produce a lot more housing, then you will need more labor, because it will win votes. So, well, if you want construction workers to build housing for the general public, of course you will get support, as long as it's not for the rich and powerful. And when you develop sites, what about a transportation network? You have to think about the capacity. Say, for example, for the MTR service, 12 cars. And if people can't squeeze into the cars, and they can't get to work, and that's simply not sustainable. And that is my view. Well, I don't think he will be able to answer my questions even if we have time. Mr. Tian, maybe I will give the Secretary some time to reply to members' questions if there was no such time to do so in members' rounds. Next, Ms. Elizabeth Quat. Thank you. We have a housing shortage. Of course, I support the administration's effort in their investment in infrastructure and to get better prepared for our future, so that the same problem will not occur again, that we will not get stuck. However, we have to tackle the problems that are at hand. A lot of people are having problems with housing, and there is insufficient commercial area for youngsters and businesses to operate or start their business. Will you put in place maybe some suitable measures, say, for example, by increasing plot ratio? It's not just about the shortage of residential or commercial space. We need social facilities, say, for example, RCHEs and childcare centers, libraries. There are public housing estates being built, private ones being built, but I'm sure there is space to build some community facilities. But what about car parking space? When you encourage people to give birth, then you need parking space for, say, school buses. What about rehabilitation, the rehab bus? For newly built PRH estates, more of such car parking space is not allowed. Well, can you maybe increase the plot ratio so that more residential care homes for elderly people, childcare centers can be built? Secretary. Thank you, Ms. Scott, for her questions. Plot ratio. In last year's policy address, it was mentioned that when it comes to short-term increase of land, increasing plot ratio is a way, apart from Hong Island North and Kowloon is difficult, but where possible, we will increase the PR by 20%.
If you ask me whether we can increase it by more than 20%, then it depends on where the site is. If planning conditions permit, meaning after increasing plot ratio, if ventilation, transport, and water supply, drainage, etc., if those can cope, we will not object. Some members mentioned GIC uses, including RCHEs. If there is a site that can be used for this purpose, we can certainly include it, just like in certain PRH. You do see RCHE and other GIC facilities. As for parking space, I can defer to Director of Planning, Mr. Ling. Let me add another point. Actually, in many OZPs, we would state that if government needs to provide certain GIC facilities, then those will not be counted towards the plot ratio. If there are parking spaces catering to special needs, we will do planning according to the requirements of the users. Thank you for the positive reply. But when we see new projects on a district level, this is not what we see. Can you talk more to other government departments? Ms. Quat is saying that maybe what you say is not the general truth. Well, we welcome discussion on the use of individual pieces of land. We should end our meeting at 4:30, but 7 more members have indicated their interest to speak. I will extend the meeting by 15 minutes using my discretion, but there will be a second round including James Tin and Mr. Kenneth Chan. Their questions have not been answered. If you do not object, I think I will also take care of the second round and other members who would like to ask questions. So first of all, we'll extend the meeting to 4:45 first. If there is no objection, we will carry on with the meeting. Yes, Ms. Chen Yun-han? I will certainly support you, but at 4:30, I will have to chair a meeting on retirement protection. Just now, Mr. James Tin publicly said that the labor sector should not support increased working hours. But what should I do? I have to chair a meeting at 4:30, and yet I need to respond to James Tin. Ms. Chen, sorry, I cannot allow you to jump the queue because other members are queuing up. Let us try. Let us do our best. What do you mean? Can I now state my response? No. Other members have been waiting. I will ask Ms. Alice Mack to say so on my behalf. Well, certainly, yes. Ms. Mack has already registered for a second round because I think what Mr. James Tin has said is unfair. Frankly, I still want Hong Kong to continue to develop, but I think the government has to take up more responsibility. Let us be fair. Next person is Paul Chair. I would like to give 2 minutes to Paul Chair. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank members so much. I'd like to tell Mr. James Tin, there is filibustering in the council. We'd like to do many things which relate to livelihood, so we are willing to work harder. In fact, we also need time to work in the districts. I hope Mr. Tin will understand this point first. Secondly, I don't know whether it was intentional or not, it was quite provocative in that please do not push the labor sector into a cul-de-sac, or else there will be a big reaction. If the entire society turns a deaf ear to the views of grassroots laborers, we may not even support you at the Finance Committee. We may even do things more radically. Paul Chair, first I'd like to talk about a district issue. Well, I need a minute. I need another minute to respond. Well, in fact, I may be taking words out of your mouth. Never mind, I will talk about the districts. Since the director is here, and I heard a member mention the Ka-lok site. In fact, in October last year, there was a resident meeting talking about Ka-lok site. But then the residents were still not happy after that meeting. They were still worried about the transport issue. Coming back to labor, last week, I remember there was an index saying that Hong Kong came first in the world. That's the Housing Affordability Index. Hong Kong came first for a very simple reason. The government, of course, does not want to challenge the labor sector openly. But even if you want to preserve the priority of work for local workers, you are still saying that when there is a need and when appropriate, you will import labor. What do you mean by there is a need? If you can give us scientific data, in Singapore they have over 1 million imported labor. And they will tell people without that kind of imported labor what economic losses there will be. So can you not give us scientific data so people can discuss this in a calm way? And also when you say where appropriate, at the appropriate time, do you mean the next 12 months, 6 months, or what? I can say roughly that 60% of the cost is land premium, but now housing cost is now taking up 60%, and within housing cost we mean we include the labor cost. Now, if you can find land, but if you cannot tackle the construction cost, you still will lag behind the situation. I hope you will not run away from the problem anymore. And it is said that young people and students think it is a very big concern. Housing is such a big concern that it is a bigger issue than politics for them. If you don't do it well, just like what Mr. James Teen said, if you do it well, the labor sector, they also have families and they also want to be housed. So you are in a quandary. And also the military sites, you did not give a good enough answer. How did you talk to the central authorities to release the sites? The sites are sitting idle. Say, for example, certain sites that train marksmanship. I don't think you need those sites. Your time is up. I also want to go. I like to respond briefly. I know it is very difficult for you. Sorry, we are not saying asking the commercial sector to be. Sorry, please, Mr. James Teen. Members are queuing up. Just sorry, I'm not going to queue up because I need to go. Sorry, I cannot allow you to jump the gun. That's it. But Ms. Chen Yunhan used 2 minutes of Paul Che, and I'm asking Paul Chen to give me 1 minute. But sorry, Mr. Paul Che used up his time. What I said had nothing to do with the commercial sector. I'm just saying that the workers will be building housing for the labor sector as well. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, we need to have the right understanding about our land policy. A person in Hong Kong said, we don't have enough international schools because we don't have land. That person is idiotic. Now, how can he be the leader and tell us how to use our land? Because in fact, he gave land to international schools, right? Can you say yes or no? Yes or no? Did he do it? If you don't answer me, it means yes. Chairman, please ask Mr. Leung to repeat what he said. The international school, they are using a lot of our land. We have been giving land to international schools. Is that right? Chairman. Mr. Leung, are you asking the Secretary to answer this question? Yes or no? Chairman, at the Development Bureau, we are a bureau looking after land resources. We would look at the policy needs of different bureaus, including the Education Bureau, and we do our part accordingly. Okay, I stand to be corrected with what I say now. Under Donald Tsang, a lot of land has been given to international schools. There is this person called C.Y. Leung. When answering Mr. Chen Kin-po, he said that we can learn from Singapore, we can go for headquarters economy, and there are 3 factors. 1, we don't have enough international schools. And then he added, we don't have enough international schools because of land problems. Bureau Director, go back and correct C.Y. Leung. He is rocking your boat. This is a laughing stock. You know, people are laughing out loud on Facebook. He says we don't have enough land to build international schools. No, this is because our middle class are flocking to international schools because they don't like the local secondary education. And that is why international school places have been taken up. The top person is saying nonsense. And he is not having dinner with Ta Kung Pao or Wen Wei Bao. He was at a proper Q&A session with the LEUNG. Therefore, I have no confidence in this government. C.Y. Leung spoke without applying his mind. Secondly, if you say you don't have enough land, then I'll ask you this question. You are moving mountains and reclaiming land from the sea, and that is for permanent. This is going to stay. But we have a lot of land being held by people for future profits. Now, I won't say you are one of those. Will you invoke Article 105 of the Basic Law and apply it to fish ponds in the NT and also people who use farmland for container storage? Will you invoke Article 105 of the Basic Law and resume the land by paying the price for fish pond land and for farmland? I'm not saying you should pay the price of housing land. Why don't you do that? Why are you doing it to the farmers of NT, NE? And I'd like you to consider this. You must be the one to rationally tackle our land issues in Hong Kong. You should not be scrambling for land in a frenzy. Well, I will just say that Mr. Leung's criticism is unreasonable. How can you say my criticism is unreasonable? Dr. Fernando Zheng, land is, of course, the most important issue. Before assuming office, C.Y. Leung said we did not lack land. We only lacked planned land. But now you say you lack developable land. But in fact, we have been using our land in a strange way. Say, for example, Kai Tak. We have 320 hectares there. Only 9 hectares. Only 36 hectares will be used for housing, and only 9 hectares for public housing. If 3% of the land in the entire development area is developed for public housing, then how can you say you are doing this in the most earnest manner? We have many people who cannot afford the runaway property prices, and people should be able to get help because rental and property prices are well outside the affordability of Hong Kong people.
Well, flats will be built, but there are competing use for land. What do we use to build flats? Greenbelt, and now even people talk about country park. And here you talk about an artificial island, 1,000 to 1,200 hectares to get land. For what? It's not that we don't have enough land. It's about distribution and allocation. For some, you have taken your time. Kai Tak only 300 hectares, and Yuen Long, Wang Chau, you plan to build 17,000 flats there, but with the opposition from the rural committee, you withdrew it. Shui Chun Ngo, you wanted to start population intake this year. And in report 62 of the Audit Commission, well, the project started in 1999 and it should have been completed in 2005. There is a delay of 10 years. So the direction for development is not for the grassroots. Getting land is not for Hong Kong people to live in, but to build luxurious flats. They want to use Greenbelt to build more luxurious land, luxurious flats. You talk about building 290,000 public housing, but there is a shortfall of 40,000 because you don't have the land for it. So can you give us the information about the land identified for public housing? Can you give us the details? What about the 150 sites in Greenbelt? You said that they would be used for development. Can you give us a list so that we know whether you have the sincerity to build more public housing? Secretary. The 150 sites identified are scattered over 16 districts in Hong Kong. We have not gone to Tai Po to give a detailed explanation, but we have done so for the other 15 districts. We have either gone to explain to them or provided information paper. The information contains the location of the sites. This information appears in the information paper of LEUNG as well. When it comes to Kai Tak, I think it is something that we should reflect on. The initial planning of Kai Tak is to have large-scale reclamation to accommodate 200,000 people. After rounds of consultation, the community and the administration reached consensus to scale it down to an area that would accommodate about 90,000 people. At different times, we talk to the people. When it comes to Kai Tak, when we're asked whether to increase density, some members told us not to even think about it, because that is the result after rounds of consultation, and it should not be easily changed. It's not that we don't want to respond to the acute housing need of Hong Kong people. It's because of the situation at different times. It's not about allocation. We simply don't have enough. If there is sufficient land and if there is a roof over everyone's head, then the situation won't be like this. Property prices wouldn't have gone through the roof. Mr. KK Fong. Well, I would like to ask about slides 10 and 11 about land supply. In 10, you talked about the areas, the estimated area, number of flats, first intake is about 2025, so about 10 years down the line. And you said that about 20,000. And that should be 480. So there is still a shortage of 250,000. In slide 11, you mentioned about the possible locations for future development. I think it will always remain on the drawing board. I've asked experts about artificial islands. They said that if you start studying now, it will take about 20 years. Does it mean that the chief executive is going to be re-elected 3 more times? And I've been talking about military sites. According to the garrison law, Article 13, it says that if necessary, the administration can exchange land with them. Well, I think for 3 locations, it's not for, what is it called? Defense, prevention of subversion from external forces. They are Kowloon Tong, Barrack Hill, and some clubs for family members of the army. It's actually been open to non-family members, and there's also Shek Kong. Shek Kong is for the Air Force. When the facilities are relocated, not only is the land released, the height restrictions in the surrounding areas will be released too. The 3 sites will give us about 250 hectares, with a height restriction taken away. I think you will get about 100,000 units. Or let me reiterate, it's not to take the site away from them, to exchange sites with them. You take it first, and then they will be given another site back later. The Secretary and the administration talked about short, medium, and long term. The way I see it, there are lots of long-term measures and medium ones, but not really any short-term ones. You told us that there are 70 to 80,000 people living in subdivided flats. They suffer from high rental and a small living space. Is it the case that the Secretary is at his wit's end? Well, in Ho Man Tin, there is a site that has been laid idle for 10 years. There are a lot of these idle sites. Can't you maybe make available some land in the short term, say 3 to 5 years, that will immediately resolve the problems for those who are living in subdivided flats? Mr. Fong talked about the 2 slides about long-term land supply. 480,000 in 10 years, that is only a small share. In NT North and Kutong North, we're talking about 2033 when it's commissioned. We've identified 150 sites which will generate 210,000 units. We have measures, but whether that they are successful depends on whether you support us. In 2013 policy address, it's proposed that for GIC and Greenbelt sites that there should be rezoning. We have completed the relevant work for 36 sites, which will produce 37,000 units. And when it comes to military sites, I've already answered the questions. Mr. Chang and Pen, thank you. Sorry, speakers of mic. Well, He's used 2 seconds of mine. I welcome the short, medium, and long-term measures. There has been a lot of proposals, say for example Tsingy West, that we've proposed, that they've been taken on board by the administration. In Lantau development in the East Lantau metropolis, the Lantau Development Advisory Committee discussed it. A study will start soon. When it comes to connectivity, we hope that Trunk 11, that is being planned, will have not just will have vehicular traffic and a railway service as well, so that people living there can take the train or be driven to Hong Kong Island. When it comes to new territories, it will be the main source of land in the coming future. But for people living in the new territories, they think the quality of living is very important. And recently, people living there think that it is more crowded. In the past, it was quite nice, but now there has been constant congestion and is more crowded. And it's not just about living standard. With more flats being built, there is no announcement about transportation network. Is it the case that there is a communication breakdown between the planning department and the transport department? Can you tell us whether there is good communication and whether the 2 departments have coordinated? When it comes to transport planning, who takes the lead? You form the land first, or you build the road first? And we know that with more people complain. Some members said that there is a shortage of car parking space. There's always a queue waiting for outside car parks, and they refuse to increase the number of car parking spaces. Say To Kwa Wan West Rail Station, there will be a number of residential projects being built. There is insufficient car parking spaces in central To Kwa Wan to start with, but with those projects, you only allow just over 100 parking spaces. Traffic will be worse. We identify problems. We told departments about them, and then they said they would look into it. So when you start developing, people will object to it, and that is not the right way to go about it. Secretary, about artificial island and Lantau development, connectivity, railway service, when I answer Mr. Michael Tian's question, I have given you the information. It will be included in the consultancy report about supporting transport service when there are more people. Well, there is the Railway Development Plan 2014. Some of the services are planned in NT. Yes, well, there is an extension, and there is an extra railway service planned, but it's cut. That's it. But that will include Lantau Island. Mr. Chan, if you're interested, you can raise the issue and follow it up in the transport panel. Is there a communication breakdown between the 2 bureaus? No, it's just that you interrupted me. I apologize. What I meant was, well, our bureau and the THB were both policy bureaus. In our routine work, we will include TIA and mitigating measures or solutions. We will follow up on Mr. Chan's concern. Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you. It's difficult to get land, and it's not a simple task. when it comes to dealing with recreation land occupied by private clubs or sites occupied by utility, we see that land is not optimized. Land use is not optimized. And I've said at different times, with shortage of land resources, we have to start thinking about stacking the facilities up. Say, for example, above road, there will be a cluster of buildings.
It's just like private playground. Maybe the recreational facilities can be integrated into a building so that we can have recreational facilities and land use combined. However, I cannot see any concrete policy in this regard. I cannot see you have considered this point, and that is whether you will make the best use of the land used for public facilities so as to optimize the land use. Just now Mr. LEUNG said GIC land is not subject to any plot ratio control. Unfortunately, when we discussed community facilities in this council, your staff say there are many restrictions. They talk about plot ratio control. Remember, recently we passed the Ka-lok Customs and Excise staff quarters. It was said that the plot ratio was 2.5. We could not understand it. It was so difficult to find a site for C&E staff quarters. There is a big demand for this. Now, why can't you build more? Secondly, there is a lack of parking spaces. Why don't you provide more? And then on other occasions, we have to build as much as possible on different sites. So how come we don't apply the same yardstick to government land and other pieces of land? If, like what you said, Mr. LEUNG, and maybe Bureau Director, you should go back and check the situation. When community facilities are proposed by different departments, do they maximize the plot ratio? And also, shouldn't there be a policy where public facilities, including roads, should be put to maximum use, instead of just building a noise barrier on top of the road? Because that is a lose-lose situation. Bureau Director, I will ask Mr. LEUNG to respond. Mr. LEUNG, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, for your comment and question. In Chang Kwan O, that C&E staff quarters, I think I have to go back and look at the case before I can give you a response. As for land for public facilities and optimizing the use of the sites, we have huge concern as well. If we plan a facility on a piece of land and if we think we can increase the density, we will do it. So you would say the land would have been planned for a community hall, but we may even add housing to it, putting the community hall in the lower stories. But the development density is subject to limits. Say, for example, whether we can really build housing over and above roads. Now, I think we really have to think twice about this. We have to be very cautious in order to strike a balance when density is increased. Well, you have seen developments under flyovers like in Kwun Tong and also above public transport interchange. We will not give up any space that can be used. I'd just like you to go back and do a checking. Objectively, we have seen community facilities not optimizing the use of land. Let me add one point. There are two types of community facilities. One, that the land has already been zoned GIC. But like the Bureau Director said, within a housing development, we can include certain public facilities. sometimes these are not counted towards plot ratio. If it is counted towards the plot ratio, then perhaps you can relax it. These are two different types. Mr. Wu is asking the administration to see whether the policy is consistent. If it is a GIC site, members' feelings are that the plot ratio is lower than private development. Since we have a tight supply of land, you should think more about the use of such GIC sites. But this may have something to do with the policies of certain departments. Say it is the land for a bureau, and the bureau says it just needs so much to be provided and not more. But perhaps you can coordinate more amongst yourselves so other departments or bureaus can also use that site. Thank you. Thank you very much. As the government, we have the responsibility to make sure that every piece of land is used to the maximum. Next, Ip Kwok Him. Indeed, the PA has mentioned housing as the most important policy. But for housing to be built, we need land. So we see from the PowerPoint presentation the different measures to increase land. But how can you really guarantee land supply? Recently, we can see there are many comments and even criticism of business-government collusion in the NENT development, and also the study about central waters. It was vetoed by the PWSC because of the opposition camp. So how can you make sure that there will be land in the long term? And then in the short term, you have to think more about creating land. Apart from making available new land, I know you are considering green belts, but there is land that has been planned, and you should consider the density, like in Kam Sheung Road, Pat Hung. These are railway superstructure projects, 10 hectares in Kam Sheung and 24 hectares in Pat Hung. In Kai Tak, you can provide 13,000 units on 10 hectares of land. If you combine Kam Sheung and Pat Hung, you have 38 hectares of land. However, the density is very low. In 2012-13, you have only mapped out 8,700 units. Will you adjust the plot ratio so you can address the demand problem or the supply problem more effectively? Can I ask Mr. Thomas Chow to respond? Mr. Ip, you are very correct. In the long term, we face a lot of challenges. As the director said, public acceptability is crucial. When we rezone land, when we do long-term planning, every individual will look at his own interest, whether his sightline is blocked, whether there will be more traffic generated. So we are appealing to everybody in society. Please have in mind the overall housing need and also economic development in Hong Kong, and don't only look at his personal interest. Mr. Ip mentioned Kam Sheung and Pat Hung. As we said, we will maximize the use of every site, but we also have to be mindful about the transport, water supply and drainage to see how big a population a site can afford to take. We have already maximized the use of the land in question depending on the supporting facilities. Certainly, in the vicinity of Kam Sheung and Pat Hung, there are still sites. We will try to provide the supporting infrastructure so that we can try our best to increase the number of units. Well, you have to review it because you can build over 12,000 units in 10 hectares. But here you have over 30 hectares, and this is above the railway station. I don't think there is any transport problem. Bureau Director, will you consider this? Well, apart from transport, there are other public facilities. Now, if the project is going to wait for the supporting infrastructure, then it will be a waste of time. But we will build housing according to what infrastructure facilities we already have. And later on, we can try to increase the density when there is more infrastructural support. 22 members have asked questions in the first round. And Mr. James Toe is not here. I will allow Ms. Alice Mack a second round, but now I would ask some questions first. Just now we were very concerned about new developable land. The PA and also your paper mentioned urban renewal. By redeveloping certain buildings, we can have more units, but there is aging in our buildings, and so urban renewal is something we must embark on. I'm aware that the URA has adjusted the demand-led development, and it is said that these sites cannot be too small. It should not be 400 square meters, but 700 square meters. Actually, looking at the urban area as a whole, Bureau Secretary, can you consider this? Very often we emphasized urban renewal, the urban part, instead of just one building. And the URA is not there to make a profit. It should just try to break even. So if you emphasize large sites too much, what are you going to do about the smaller ones? How can they integrate into renewed areas? Members are also very concerned about cooperatives for civil servants. They have been built for quite some time, and some of them should be redeveloped to release land for more units to be built. And these sites are usually in the urban area. So I like to mention that you can do redevelopment in the urban area, and you should do more. Can you comment on the situation? Yes, thank you, Chairman. Apart from demand-led projects, there are also self-initiated projects by the URA. About demand-led projects, we have had 3 phases in the past. Given the present situation in the property market, these projects had to be heavily subsidized. We agree urban renewal has a social value. That is why the URA will not be looking for profit in every project, and that will be impractical. But given limited resources, the URA has to select projects. If we put in public money, and if we are only going to build pencil buildings, that wouldn't be ideal. That's why, after the review recently, the URA made proposals to optimize the demand-led projects. including the size of the site. They say it should not be smaller than 700 square meters. Chairman, with regard to self-initiated projects of the URA, there is not this restriction, and they have more latitude. They will look at the districts and the situation or conditions of the buildings to give flexible consideration.
About civil servants cooperatives. We're actually looking into it when it comes to land available from these redevelopments. We're prepared to come back to the panel to explain to you afterwards. Second round, Alice Mack, 3 minutes, question and answer included. Ms. Mack. When I asked in the second round, I wanted to talk about brownfield sites. I know that your bureau alone is not enough to resolve this problem because it involves illegal use of these brownfield sites for logistics use. I hope, Secretary, you will discuss with the THB. You asked them about what their policy is about the logistics industry and what suggestions they have. And in NDAs, say, for example, in Hon Charles, there are tens of hectares reserved for the logistics industry. If that is indeed the case, would they construct multi-story buildings on brownfield sites for the logistics industry? A site may be earmarked, but when it's not taken further, when the NDA is actually developed, then it's of no use. Are there any supporting measures to help operating logistics companies to move into these buildings? Maybe you think that you rely on the logistics industry to create tens of thousands of jobs, say 50,000 in Hon Charles. And if you don't do anything to support the companies, it won't happen. I hope you will liaise with the THB, and I hope the THB will have supporting measures for you. And I have to respond to Mr. James Tian's point. I think the Secretary was right. We should not put each other at opposing ends. Housing shortage is not because of construction workers. Are there any PRH sites that are not going as it should because of shortage of construction worker? Yes, we're not on opposing ends. We should be pragmatic in looking for a solution. But we don't accept your enhancement measures. As the policy address said, that there are other measures if it doesn't work. So they have actually given a hint that the supplementary labor scheme will be expanded. That is what the FTU doesn't accept. Some people say that labor cost is high, project cost is high, but it's not because of the high wages of construction workers. We met with the CE last year. We told them very clearly that project overrun is not because of high labor cost. Is, say, for example, the procurement system and the increasing fees of consultants. So I support that the procurement system should be reviewed. We still have Mr. Paul Tse who would like to ask questions. Any other members who would like to ask questions after Mr. Tse? If not, after Mr. Tse has asked his questions, we'll ask the Secretary to reply to questions that were not answered. Mr. Porter. Well, I was asking a question and it's about labor. I hope the Secretary will answer me. There is always a there is always a conflict. If you ask whether we have sufficient doctors, I'm sure you will give us a very clear stance. Well, we're not from the construction sector, not from the real estate sector, not from the labor sector, but we should say something that is fair. We ask the administration to provide us with scientific figures to tell us the labor shortage. What is it like? When will the problem be resolved? And I would like to ask two simple questions. First, energizing Kowloon East office. I know that everyone's working very hard. I see that there are already a lot on your plate. You have walkable, the Kowloon East. You have different projects in East Kowloon. You have the WKCD. You have Kai Tak Fantasy. You have the Smart City. These are brilliant ideas. But when will they leave the drawing board? What's the progress? Well, Ms. Lin is here, the Director for Lands. I would like to say this. I've heard from my friends that with the cooling measures, the number of cases have dropped and registration has taken a lot longer. Say, for example, for columbarium, the registration process has been delayed because of a shortage of land. Kowloon East, I would ask the district officer and Mr. Ling to answer. Well, I thank Mr. Zhe for asking the question. Our approach is to implement a short, medium, and long-term improvement measures. When it comes to transportation, maybe it will take a bit more time to put in a footbridge. It may take a bit more time to install the environmental friendly transportation link, but we will increase the greening area to improve the environment as a whole. When it comes to smart city, there are different areas. We see from overseas experience that a lot of importance is attached to low carbon emission. We want to improve connectivity, and there are infrastructure projects, say for example district cooling system and the environmental transport link. Well, actually, the backlinks is also a part of a walkable Kowloon East. It will be incorporated into pedestrian network. We also set up platform for people to know more about government services, development of an intelligent transportation network. Maybe I will have an exchange session with Mr. Day on another occasion. Mr. Ling, please. Ms. Lin. When it comes to enforcement of land lease, well, once the lease is agreed, then it will be taken to the lands registry for registration. And as to time it takes for registration, if it's only a technical amendment, well, there are more cases that we deal with now, so we will accord priority. If it's related to housing supply, we will focus on these lease modifications first. And when it comes to columbaria cases, it will take longer. It takes time to consult the district bodies, and there may be certain terms that are disliked by the community, and we have to spend more time on working on these. Mr. Day, you talked about it takes longer for conveyancing to be completed. Do you have anything to add? And not just sales and purchase of land, of property as well, so conveyancing. Well, once it's completed, as I said, that it will be registered at the lands registry. And as to whether the process will be somewhat, it will take a different time to what we understand it to be. Well, I'm afraid I can't answer you. Well, then the question, I think it's for the lands registry. Perhaps we will liaise with Mr. Jie to give him answers. You may not have time to answer questions previously asked. Would you like to do so, to answer them now? Yes. About the development of brownfield site and liaison with the THB, I thank Ms. MOK for the reminder, and we're actually working with them. There is a cross-departmental working group with representatives of the THB, and we've said a lot about the import of foreign labor. And there will be opportunities for us to have in-depth discussions with those from the labor sector. Two members who have left asked questions. Mr. Kenneth Chen asked 3 questions, one about tree, one about a small house policy, and town planning. Written questions have been sent to us before, and we don't have anything to add. Mr. James Tian's point, I'd like to say that when it comes to lands, we don't have the mentality that we only look at the short term. We endeavor to resolve these problems, say for example, a review of land use and a number of other measures for short term, say Lantau development, NT North, preliminary feasibility study, and we also would like to take forward Hong Tong Chung and Ku Tong North, NT North project starting from 2023. And 10 years after that, these projects will be completed. And Lantau Island and also NT North will come a bit later than those. And as to whether we will have sold all the land and there will be no more for the government afterwards, well, I recall in 2013 when I was here to brief members about the policy address, Mr. James Tian said that after we've sold the land for 2013-14, then we would have run out of land. But I must say that colleagues from different departments have worked very hard to resolve the problems. In the fiscal year ending 2014-15, for private land, there will be over 20,000 units. We are determined. We will leave no stone unturned to take forward our work, and hopefully we will be able to provide a stable land supply for both public and private housing. That's the end of this discussion item. I thank the administration for joining us, and I also thank members for their questions. There are no other business. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.